being addicted to electrons and not paper so much, I was originally going to read off the screen as my prompt, but they can't set it up that way, so I have to use a bit of paper. Sorry, old staff. I don't do Bill support today. The origin of this talk today actually arose when I was here last year. This is the second year I've been to DHSI, and I had so much fun last year, I had to come back again. And last year, that arose out of a discussion I had at RIG about the place of digital humanities within the institution, and more specifically about the question of evaluation within the institution colleagues. For those of you who are in the system as professors, you know that sometimes evaluation, if you're working in new areas, which are not areas which other colleagues are really in sync with, is sometimes a risky thing, because the ways of evaluating your work and giving credit and merit and all that sort of thing for it, and the standards by which it is evaluated, really aren't there. However, that is changing. But that was the original impetus of the discussion that we had last year, and then Ray asked me to do something for this year, and I thought, okay, I'll do that. This talk has taken a number of meanders along the way, and I thought that I would use this title because in part it reflects on our time, and in part it reflects on the situation in which we find digital humanities right now. So I'm going to get launched on this. It should take about 30 minutes, I think, and we'll see how we go. I'm going to start out by giving a little bit of context. I come at this really from three perspectives. Perspective as a professor, perspective as someone who's done some work in digital humanities and in the research side, and then also as an administrator. So it's this last aspect that's really going to dominate. So I'll start out with this one. As you heard, I'm a prof of French lit and culture, 19th century, and in the beginning, many years ago, I actually started out doing literary theory, which is really where I came from. And over the years, that kind of morphed into a number of different things. And one of those areas in which I work is really that interface between science and literature. So different discourses of knowledge and the way those discourses of knowledge interact with each other, define objects of study, cancel each other out, or converge together in various ways. So recently, my collaborator Christine Webb and I did a number here. This is on the publication text at the University of Toronto. And the French are really good at having words for just about everything, called this, as you see from the title there, epistemocritique. So epistemocritique is that study of the interfaces of different forms of knowledge and the way they intersect, in fact, in different ways. Humanistic and discourses of the arts on one hand, and the discourse of the sciences, natural and life sciences on the other. Now, that's kind of the key perspective out of which I work, because I think that's really what's going on now. As we move into the 21st century, we're moving away, slowly, from that narrow disciplinary definition, which is the basis of the modern university, and I think that's within that type of framework that we have to situate what's going on in humanities computing also. So these disciplinary formations, though not bad things at all in themselves, they do reflect a certain way of using and developing knowledge, which grows right out of the specializations of the 19th and 20th century economic situations with the division of labor. Well, we find the same thing in the knowledge industry, and that has structured the universities we live in today. So that imposes all sorts of constraints upon us. There are, of course, a number of benefits, but it certainly does impose a great number of constraints. Second sort of perspective that I'm working out of would be the work I actually was involved in years ago before I got into the black hole of administration. Are you aware? If you become an administrator, certain parts of your life will be reduced, and part of it is actually the research side. But years ago, when I was a graduate student, my first contact actually with humanities computing was back at U of T, and some of you may have worked with Russ Woldridge or with Pierre Duplaté, who worked at U of T in those years. And that was about 1978, 1980, and that was my first introduction to using digital applications to study text. Now, of course, those were the days when you had to go to the computing center, stand in line, go there at midnight, wait for your mainframe time, wait for your reams of paper to be printed out. It was a pretty laborious thing. Things have since changed. Later on, at U of A, I was able to pursue other areas, which in fact brought together humanities computing and literature, and one of these was to deal with the what I perceived as narrative patterns and certain structures within the work of Jules Deleuze. That's the man on the right there, the big beard, who was the major writer to come out of the Commune in 1871 in Paris and wrote a series of texts called Jacques Ventras. So a trilogy of books about growing up, essentially, in France and how a revolutionary was formed. Well, the thought on that one was the fact that there were narrative structures which were throughout this trilogy, which were based on the work of the other man in the beard in the picture there at the bottom, who was Pierre Proudhon. And Proudhon, of course, was a famous anarchist of the 19th century and developed a particular form of conceptualization of what anarchy was. So the point was, how do you take these kind of abstract conceptual structures and actually map them into the narrative structures of the novel? Was there a transfer from a type of conceptualization of political theory into narrative realizations? So that's kind of the second perspective. That's the sometimes worker in the fields of humanities computing. Third perspective is really something I alluded to more when I was at U of A. I was at U of A for 19 years at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. I was the department chair for 7 years there. And that was a time of great expansion of humanities computing. As many of you know, it's a very strong humanities computing element at the U of A. And we increasingly got into some of these things as possibilities were available. One of those possibilities was humanities computing MA Hugo. And I met actually one person here who was a third-generation graduate from Hugo. And I worked on that one back in those days when we put that program together. Now, when we put that program together, nobody came to us and said, hey, we want a humanities computing program. Nobody even knew what it was. But many people, a few people, had a vision. And that vision was that we needed a link between the content providers, the people who knew content areas on the one hand, the disciplines, and then the people who built the tools on the other hand. And those groups didn't know how to talk to each other. So that was the basis of the formulation of that program. Now that was created in the 90s when we were busy cutting things in Alberta. So it wasn't a very good time, in fact, to launch new programs. But clearly, it spoke to the Alberta government at that time, and don't forget this is Klein in those days, because it offered some major advantages. And one of those major advantages was it prepared students not only for an academic career to take this knowledge and apply it in their academic studies, but also to go out into the real world and to contribute to the economy by working in the growing IT industry. So that was a major step forward in building the whole notion of humanities computing at that time. That's more the creation of the academic programs. The second element to that was the one you have on the right. That's ARC. And ARC was the Arts Resource Center. Once you've got these things, you've got to resource them. It's murder. If you've ever tried to resource humanities computing, equipment-rich programs, you know how difficult it is. They're expensive, and even though the cost of the equipment has fallen, making sure that you can get those things in the replacement cycle is not easy. So the second part that grew with this was ARC, and that was the part that created infrastructure for teaching and research. Third area then that was really significant there, and which got that buy-in, that institutional buy-in, was TAPOR. Most of you here know about TAPOR. Right now we're all waiting with bated breath for the CFI announcement about whether or not TAPOR will be funded for its next generation. And my university in Waterloo and a few others are trying to buy into this. We're working on that now to become TAPOR knows. But that was the creation of a research entity within the university. Now, of course, when I was a department chair at that time, convincing colleagues that we should give up space, convincing colleagues that we should give up TA shifts to support TAPOR was not easy. Why would you want to do that? We need more French TAs. We need more people in the German classroom. Spanish is expanding. Why put someone into that? But we did it because we saw that, in fact, that was part of the future and there was a vision behind that. So this is really kind of the third element that, in my own experience, has developed over the years, and that is putting together the pieces necessary to buy that institutional support within the university and beyond. Now, of course, we don't want to just sit there and wait for things to happen. That's what deans often do, sit in their office waiting for the next disaster to walk through the door. It might be a digital humanities disaster, it might be a digital humans coming in and asking for money. You can't tell. So we have to be a little bit proactive in this and not simply wait for things to drop from the sky and hope to think good things are going to happen. So we have to plan about what we're going to do. My main thought on this is the following. Humanities computing has grown immensely. Any of you who have been working in this area for the last 15 or 20 years know, you remember what it started out as. And in fact, some of you might remember Terry Butler, who unfortunately passed away